Well, hey, what's going on? Welcome into Chatterbox Reds. Nick Kirby, joined by my pal Austin Layton. Let's talk a little Reds baseball. Some getting into January, but man, I tell you what, pitchers and catchers sneaking up on us here pretty quick. Before we get to all that, as always, Chatterbox Reds is proudly sponsored by Deep South Commodities. DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to our friends at DSC. All right, well, let's bring in Austin Layton. Austin, my friend, the coldest time of the year, but hey, I keep looking up and I'm like, man, these pitchers and catchers are going to be reporting here pretty soon.
Yeah, as you mentioned that it was January, I'm like, man, it really seems like the furthest point away from baseball weather. But I mean, hey, next month we got pitchers and catchers. I'll take that. Hopefully, it's only warmer weather from here because pretty much all of Reds country is probably getting some good wind chill right about now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Reds Caravan, I know, is this weekend. Unfortunately, doesn't make any stops near me. But we're not going to run through the whole list of where everyone's at. But a lot of cool stuff. I know there's people always want bigger names on the Caravan. But there is some. Terry Francona is going to be there. Nick Krall. Some really good prospects. Sal Stewart, Cam Collier are on a stop. So check that out, reds.com. They have the full list of where the caravan's at, but some of the prospects that are going to be on there, I think are really cool to check out. And hey, when you see a prospect in person and then they mature and get in the big leagues, you have like this extra sense of like uh, emotion to them. So I think it's cool if you're able to check it out. Be sure to check out Red's Caravan. And hey, let us know if you do in the comments on YouTube. Tweet at me. Let me know how the caravan is. I'd love to hear about all of that. All right. Well, still dissecting the Gavin Lux news, the trade last week that kind of really felt like came out of nowhere. Was I was pretty shocked that it happened. Um, I've taken some time to dissect it. We'll get Austin's thoughts here in a second, but I know I'm the optimistic guy, but I tell you what, the more I look at Gavin Lux, the more excited I am about this trade for the Reds. Gavin Lux, I think a lot of people said, "Oh yeah, Lux is fine. He's a big leaguer. He's a okay player," and I think that's kind of the perception. I think there's a lot more upside than that. I don't think there's enough credit to Lux given his upside. Let me put it this way. If Gavin Lux played for the Cincinnati Reds in 2024 and he performed the way that he did for the Dodgers in the second half of the year, and Reds fans saw it firsthand, I think people would be over the moon excited for Gavin Lux right now. They'd be like, this guy's one of our best hitters. They'd feel that. But because you didn't see that, you only see the in numbers, which, kind of are pedestrian. Like literally at exactly, I think, a 100 weighted runs created plus. You don't feel like how good he was in the second half, but coming back off a major injury, was one of the best hitters in baseball in the second half. I don't think he's going to be one of the best hitters in baseball for the Reds, but I think he's a well above average hitter, and I think there's still some upside. He's still very young. I pointed this out on social media. He's 2 weeks older than Spencer Steer. He's 2 weeks older than Spencer Steer. So if you're a Spencer Steer believer and you believe that Spencer Steer is still going to progress and has upside, which I think you should, then why do you not believe the same thing with Gavin Lux? He's still incredibly young, debuted very young, and I'm really, really excited about this move. I think Gavin Lux is a needle mover. I think people view this as he helps the team improve, but he doesn't move the needle. He's a needle mover, in my opinion.
It's definitely a trade that's grown on me as well because at first glance you're like, we just got Jonathan India again, right? It's like, what the reason that we traded Jonathan India, the real Jonathan India in the first place is because we really didn't need Jonathan India. And so you get this guy, it's like, all right, second baseman, but I think it's got a lot of ramifications for what's going to happen with the rest of the infield. And I won't get into all that because there's about 100 different trajectories that you can go when shifting guys around. But I think all the stuff that you just said excites me. He's obviously trending in the right direction, coming off an injury, especially obviously towards the end of last year, like you hit on. But then even kind of the intangible stuff too, of just being on the Dodgers for the past few years. it seems like every interview that I've watched of him over the past week, they always ask, well, what's it like being, around Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Shohei? It's like, what did you get to pick these guys' brains at all? So it's like, and he's saying all the stuff that you would want him to say. I watched, Freddie Freeman in the batting cage and things like that. So it's cool because you got to expect that he's got to bring at least a little bit of that kind of winning culture and mentality. And he kind of knows what a winning clubhouse is like, which for the Reds, I mean, they don't really have a lot of veterans on the team that can really speak from that perspective. So I think it's really good from that regard. And then it certainly provides some depth. So I think going off of what kind of Nick Krall said and a lot of the guys have said, his primary position, second base, I think, from what we've heard from some other reports, he can play, third base and things like that, but maybe not as strong of an arm as you would hope for over there. So I don't know. I think it's going to be really interesting. And it seems like they're definitely going to try to figure it out, come spring training of where all this kind of pieces together. And I kind of agree with some of the takes that it's like, hopefully this isn't their only move, but I think it's a sleeper pick because kind of to what you were hitting on too. If he was on our team last year, he would have been probably one of the better players on the team last year, just like Jonathan India was. But I think that Reds fans just don't see it as like the big name that they were kind of hoping they'd get. But in like a vacuum, I mean, we traded a draft pick for basically a major leaguer, a guy that we drafted, I should say, for a major leaguer and a compensation pick. But I think return wise, it's the Reds pretty much getting creative to get an improvement on the roster now. And I think, the biggest thing for me too, or maybe not the biggest thing, but one of the things I look at is it's definitely a focus on winning now and helping this team now than whatever you were going to get for these draft picks that we gave up that, are years down the road and could never potentially pan out. So I think overall the club improved, which is always good to see. They just got to figure out the defensive positioning now, but that'll be another podcast.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point too, I mean, Jose Trevino as well. I mean, he played in the World Series against Gavin Lux. So, I do think that the whole veteran leadership can certainly go overboard and be overhyped, and there is that. But I don't think we should completely dismiss it either. Like, there's definitely some value to that when you do still have an incredibly young team, which the Reds still have an incredibly young team as they've grown older a little bit the last couple of years, but they're still going to be one of the younger teams in baseball. There definitely is some good stuff with Gavin Lux and Trevino, who are guys that aren't very old themselves, but they have played in the highest pressure situation that you can play in the World Series. So I think that is something good to see. And I think Trevino also is a guy that I think could really provide some sneaky good value. I mean, when you're just talking in terms of adding wins to your team, obviously you really couldn't have been much worse than Luke Maile was last year as a backup catcher. Well, Jose Trevino is going to be one of the best, if not the best backup catcher in baseball next year. And so that's a little bit more wins potentially there than you might think. If Luke Maile's really worth -1 wins and Jose Trevino is worth maybe 2 wins, well, that's 3 wins swinging the other way. And 3 wins could be the difference of 82 game wins or 85 wins, which could be the difference of making the playoffs or not making the playoffs. And it was in 2023. So I think the Jose Trevino move also has a chance to maybe be a little more sneaky of a move in terms of value. And, look, both those moves definitely improve the club. I don't think there's any other way to look than that. But the big news of this week, and I talked about it with Craig Sandlin, went on, did a podcast and a YouTube video right after the news broke, but Reds kind of in the last minute decided to go back to their ex to FanDuel Sports Network. Wasted so much time talking about this whole offseason. And here we are. We're right back with FanDuel Sports Network. We won't get into the whole logistics of that. Although I do want to ask you, Austin, because we actually did a show together kind of talking about this earlier in the offseason. How surprised were you with this news?
Pretty surprised because, I mean, to your point, yeah, we broke it down in depth. We thought this was for sure, the ultimate guide of watching Reds baseball next year. Then seemingly out of nowhere, this comes up and it kind of makes you think that it was all maybe a negotiating ploy by the Reds. And maybe, who knows if they actually planned that, but it kind of worked out that way. we're going with the MLB. Here's some leverage. And to your point, getting back into the relationship with their ex, and they're pretty much right back where they started. Adding that you had the streaming option to it, I guess, which is kind of nice going direct to consumer that way. But I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really move the needle either way for me because for the most part, it's going to be exactly the same as it was last year for the majority of fans. I would assume. But I guess the silver lining is it probably is more money that they were going to get from this deal, or they're going to get more money out of this deal than they would have if they just stayed with MLB producing the games and distributing them. You'd have to think. So for me, I mean, if it gives the Reds more money, I'm all about it. Keep the consistency. I use my cable login to get on the app anyway, so it doesn't necessarily make a difference in my world too much. But other than that, I think if it's been kind of weird of the reporting of how much money they got out of this. So I don't know if it's going to be the huge bump that really pushes this offseason to the next level, but more is always a good thing.
Yeah, and just to talk a little bit more about this, one of the biggest questions that we've got, and something I want to make sure that I clarify and try to make very clear to Reds fans. If you watched the Reds in 2024 and you had a way to watch them, it will still work the exact same way. It'll just be on the channel will be FanDuel Sports Network, which I think on most cable providers is the exact same channel number and everything else as Bally Sports Ohio was and as Fox Sports Ohio was before that. So if you watch the Reds, you'll be good. Nothing's really changed at all for you. Everything's the same. And really everything was going to be the same for the most part for them through MLB also. So really nothing changed for that group of people. The only people that are really impacted with this is the people that wanted to take advantage of the streaming only option. I think for them, it does kind of stink because I think the MLB app's a lot better, but you still have that option to just simply buy the package through FanDuel Sports Network, which I believe is going to be $20 a month. That's what it is currently. They might raise that. I would be surprised if they raise that before their first season of launching this. That feels like a year 2 price increase. I feel like they're going to want to try to get as many as possible. And I wouldn't honestly be surprised if they maybe even do some sort of like the first month is $5 or something like that to kind of try to lure people in. Like if I was them, that would be my thing. I would say, hey, let's do like an April $5, $10, something like that. I wouldn't be shocked if they do something along those lines. But
yeah, because especially during the season, I mean, you only have the Reds essentially for that channel, right? I mean, once the Blue Jackets end and NBA doesn't start up until the fall, basically. So I mean, I can't. Hopefully, they don't raise it. I guess is where I'm going with that, but we'll see what they do, and hopefully, they can get the channel on more providers too, because I know that's been a big issue. But we'll see where that goes.
Well, that's also been we're shifting into this. I wasn't trying to go too far into this, but it is such a big thing for Reds fans. I don't think it's going to end up on YouTube TV or Hulu, and I don't think it's a Reds thing or a FanDuel Sports Network. I think YouTube TV and Hulu and any of the others are another big one that doesn't. I know Fubo is the one that
Fubo,
does.
yeah.
They have them, but it seems like YouTube and Hulu, they've made like their business model. We are not messing with these RSNs, the regional sports networks. Like they don't have any of them. It's not the Reds. Like they have literally none of them across the country. I don't think they want that into their model. So I don't think that's going to be an option. But I mean, the nice thing is you could have YouTube TV, and for $20 more a month, you could have the Reds. I would just encourage you sign up in April, cancel in September. If you're not a diehard and the Reds fall out of the race in July, you can cancel in July and you paid $60. I mean, and it's not going to happen. The Reds are going to be in it all year, but you get my point there.
Absolutely. But no, we don't have to do that anymore.
All right. Well, the big talking point that we wanted to really discuss today was the comments that came out on Monday, courtesy of Gordon Whitmire, the Cincinnati Enquirer, from Nick Kroll. Nick Kroll was talking about the new TV deal, and he said these quotes: just getting a little bit more money is great. We can work a little bit more in both the free agency and the trade market. So as me and Craig speculated, this clearly had to bring some more revenue in for the Reds, or why would they do this? Well, it did. How much? I still don't know. Feel like it has to be, I feel a little more confident that it has to be a little bit substantial, because I don't think Nick Krall would give that quote if there wasn't something to it. I feel like if it was adding a couple $1 million more, I feel like Nick Krall would have gave the very, well, yeah, I mean, maybe if, added a little tiny. It felt like these words were a little more concrete. That made me think there is something here. Now, how much? I don't know. Is this enough for the Reds to go out and sign Anthony Santander, which I know is everyone's first choice right now? I don't know about that. We're not going to talk about Santander. We're going to talk about some of the other free agents. But I will say, as negative as I've been against the Anthony Santander potential deal, there was a report that he's open to a 1 to 2 year deal. I'm all for that. I love that idea for Santander. I've always been a big fan of short-term deals. I don't really care if they're going to be a guy that is a regression candidate or not. I'm all for that. I would even love a deal with him that has an opt-out after 1 year. Mr. Santander, come to Cincinnati, rake for a year, go sign your big contract somewhere else. We'll take that qualifying offer draft pick back, and we'll everything works out well. There's so many people that like talk about the Nick Castellanos deal, and they go, Nick Castellanos, he opted out. Okay. The Reds got 2 really good years out of him. Well, one really, really good year. The other was COVID. They got the one really good year out of him. He walked in free agency. He opted out and left. He signed a deal for way more money than the Reds would have ever wanted to commit to him. And the Reds got a draft pick, which turned out to be Sal Stewart, which is now one of your top draft picks. Like, that's the perfect cycle. So if the Reds could get something like that with Santander, Castellanos type, I'm all for that. I'm just not into the 4 or 5 year deal with a guy that isn't a good defender that I don't think is going to age well. Is that kind of where you're at, Austin, on that one?
Yeah, and especially if you're going to compare it to the Castellanos deal, I mean, it could have been worse, and you got the Moustakas deal that we got that same year, right? So there's some ways that you could look at it, but yeah, I agree on the short term deal. I mean, especially if you've got the money to spend and you're kind of the small market that the Reds are, I think you could. It's not as risky to basically do that in a 1 or 2 year deal, and say we even overspend, right? And people look at the Montas deal, that we had last year and things like that. The error doesn't look as bad if it's not 6 years for X million dollars, and you're kind of crippling the club from a financial aspect from years to come. Because to your other thing that we just talked about briefly, not trying to go back to it, but you don't know what the TV deal looks like after a year for this team. You don't know what kind of like revenue sources are going to look like down the road. So I can tell that the Reds are kind of a team that are always kind of solving for that unknown, and that plays a big part into their payroll just because it's a huge part of their payroll. But yeah, for a guy like Santander, I mean, I've always been against the long-term deal with him, but yeah, I mean, if he's open to a short-term deal, and I don't know if it's like 20 million or something like that, but the Reds, I think if you've got the money to spend and you want to capitalize on this window, these are the kind of the moves that you would have to make to get to that next level of an off season and building a roster, I would think. But
yeah, and I'm really glad, Austin, that you brought that up about the multiple years, because in trying to understand where the Reds are at, I don't know how much money it is, but what I do feel pretty confident is this does not give them any long-term security right now. Like, I think it gives them the opportunity to sign a short-term deal, but I do not think the way I've read into this is like this is a 1 year deal with FanDuel Sports Network, and we're going to be right back in the same boat again next year. And there's still going to be so much uncertainty. So I would be absolutely shocked if the Reds went and signed someone for more than a couple years at this point. I think it is absolutely short term. And to your point as well, like look at Mike Moustakas. People forget Mike Moustakas was actually pretty decent in the first year. It was a short season. It was only 44 games that he played in. But he has 799 OPS. I think he hit 2 home runs in the clinching game. I think people have kind of washed that season out of their minds. But, like, he was actually good the first year. So, like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, he aged horribly. He was the nightmare of a 4-year deal, but he was actually still pretty good that first year of free agency. So that's why I'm not saying Santander's Moustakas 2.0, but I see a lot of the same similarities with him. A lot of home runs, low batting average, has had some career years, but I still think Santander could be good for 1 or 2 more years. But I do see the probability, and it's always a guessing game with these guys. You never know for sure one way or the other, but I think the probability of him having a steep decline is too risky for me. But 1-2 years, hell yeah, sign me up for that.
Yeah, and the kind of crappy part about it for the Reds is you can't really afford to take those risks like some other teams can with, if you're the Mets or the Dodgers or whoever else. So it's tricky because you basically have to get it right. And if you don't get it right, or you get a lot of guys like we kind of had last year with down years, then it looks a lot stupider or more stupid, whatever the right way is to say that, than it should, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, the one thing we really want to talk about today, and this is the burning question right now, is how are you going to spend this money if you have it? We'll get to a couple. You had a couple trade ideas that we'll get to here at the end. I think that is probably still. I would probably put that as a slightly higher odds of happening as the Reds pulling off another trade. I just think that, given the way this offseason's gone, I mean, the Reds have been wheeling and dealing left and right. 3 big league trades by mid-January. I thought they were going to be hit the trade market hard, but they've really hit it hard. So I do think that's a possibility, but running through all the trade scenarios is like an impossible task. And I didn't know Gavin Lux was available. I don't think any of us knew Gavin Lux was available. So it's really, we have no idea on that. But we'll get to a couple of your ideas in a minute. But on the free agent market, Austin, why don't you go ahead and go first? Who would be your top, we'll call it realistic target for the Reds?
Yeah, exactly. Realistic after we just talked about Santander, right? And no, I think I'm still looking at the outfield, right? Because it seems like that's kind of been the target, at least for the whole offseason. It's like, hey, we're looking for an outfielder. All right, we got a starting pitcher. All right, we're still looking for an outfielder. All right, we got an infielder. So I'm still beating on the outfield, corner outfield type position here. And my top pick, if I could get one, he not only because he's got a great first name, but we've talked about him before in Austin Hayes. I think he would fit in pretty well with this team. He's not the left-hander that we're looking for. He's a righty, but just looking at his numbers compared to the rest of the league, OPS plus last year 101, 107 for his career. So he's given you just above league average for those kind of stats that you're looking at. So I think this is going to be right in the Reds wheelhouse as far as getting a guy that would improve the club and be a good fit and be productive, but not necessarily going to be the superstar pick that barring being able to get for 1 year, we can't really afford to sign. But I don't know. We've talked about Hayes before. I'm eager to see if you want to talk me out of him at all. I know he's a little bit down last year, with his WAR compared to his career, but I just think it'd be a solid addition and kind of in that sweet spot of not too crazy good, but not too crazy bad either.
Yeah, no, Hayes would have been my number 2, but I let you have him because I'm the generous guy that I am. No, but he'd be number 2 on my list. I mean, this is a guy that 2021, 2022, 2023, and really until he went to Philadelphia, even 2024, he's still at an above average. I mean, that's 4 consecutive years of being above average hitter. Pretty good track record. I think he would be a perfect complement for what the Reds have. I don't think the Reds outfield is as dire as everyone else thinks. And mainly it's because the Reds have a lot of options. They don't have a lot of great options, but they have a lot of options. And when you have a lot of options, it gives you the opportunity that a couple of these guys are going to break out. Is it going to be Will Benson? I don't know, but I'm not giving up on Will Benson like a large part of this fan base is. I'm not. I love this guy in 2023. I don't just discard someone when they have a bad season and basically their sophomore slump. Guys like Jake Fraley, I think, could still bounce back. TJ Friedel was a great player in 2023. I don't know if he's going to bounce back, but again, you get on the options. Blake Dunn was a guy that we loved going into 2024. Had a miserable year all around. It was just a bad year, but was a highly thought of prospect before that. Hurtubise. Rhys Hines had a great week, as the best week maybe I've ever seen of a baseball player. He's got a lot of flaws in his game, but he's a talented hitter that clearly has a ridiculous amount of power in a small ballpark. So it's a lot of
Maybe Gavin
options.
Lux, depending on who you listen to.
But yeah, and I think Gavin Lux could be a outfielder as well. So yeah, I don't think it's as dire, and I think Austin Hayes would be a really nice compliment for this team.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, it seems like, I think I saw he's maybe projected around the 6 million range as far as salary would go. So it's something I think that the Reds could certainly afford. I think they're right about 100 for their payroll right now as far as a team. So I can't see him going up into maybe the 20 range or higher than that. But I think this would kind of get him to where you would like to think is manageable for him. But agreed. And his name's Austin. So more points.
Can't beat that. Can't beat that. All right. My number one target is. We also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay. All right, my number one target is Randal Grichuk. And the more I look at Randal Grichuk, the more I honestly kind of am a little disgusted that the Reds did not pick him up in 2023. Like, I love the Harrison Bader move, but you look at his numbers, then you look at Hunter Renfroe's, and you're like, why the hell did we go with with Hunter Renfroe over Randal Grichuk? Randal Grichuk destroys left-handed pitching. Last 3 seasons, 926 OPS, 995 OPS, and 914 OPS against left-handed pitching. 3 straight years above 900. Splits can be fluky, so I don't love to just look at 1 year, but when you have 3 consecutive years of that, I mean, would be the perfect complement to a left-handed outfield. I think you would probably have to play him close to every day. I don't think he's going to go sign somewhere and be a strict platoon player, but he's not terrible against right-handed pitching. The thing I don't love about him is he's coming off a career year. I hate guys that are coming off career years, but I don't think he's in the same camp as like the Santander, where he's looking for a long-term deal. He's 33 years old, so he's not going to get that from anywhere. I think there's a chance of getting Grichuk for maybe 2 years. I think he is a much bigger upgrade than I think a lot of this fan base would think. I think he could outperform Santander in 2025. I mean, he was pretty close. So I don't know what their OPS plus ended up being, but Randal Grichuk was at 140. Now he only played 106 games, had a couple injuries, but for me, Randal Grichuk would be pretty my clear cut first guy.
Yeah, and I think it's another one of those situations where it's like you don't want to get him too hot, but maybe he's trending in the right direction, right? So it's a conversation that we've had before with guys like Profar and everything else. It's like you don't know if it's going to regress to the mean or it's going to be kind of what you got last year. But no, I think honestly that would be a good fit as well. And if we extended this list, he would definitely probably show up in my top 5 or so if we went that far. So I think it's weird. It's a guy that at least I don't hear a lot of teams talking about. But to your point, I mean, the performance I would think is there. And we were talking about it a little bit earlier before we got on here. It's like the outfield market is just so crazy crowded. It's like you can miss a lot of guys. So I feel like it's got to start getting underway as far as the hot stove league and everything else as we get into February, because these guys got to find a landing spot. It seems like in the next basically 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah, to your point there, was we're kind of going through this list. I was like, man, there's a lot more like decent outfielders than I thought. And to be honest, I mean, you look at kind of what the Reds did with locking up Nick Martinez, offering the qualifying offer. Remember when the Reds offered Nick Martinez a qualifying offer, there was a lot of people that said, what are they doing? And as the pitching market developed, I think people were like, oh yeah, that was pretty smart. And then they made the trade for Brady Singer early. the pitching market's not as great right now. I mean, the pitchers have flown off. Their price tags have been exorbitant. Whereas now Anthony Santander was all gung-ho 4-5 year deal. Now there's reports he might be open to a 1 to 2 year deal. So it looks at least right now, and things can certainly change rapidly, that the Reds kind of waiting, if they were waiting for the outfield market, was actually probably the right call, because there is a lot left and these guys all got to go somewhere. So I think for the Reds, it may not necessarily be about targeting the one perfect guy. It's kind of targeting the one guy that you can get at the right price point. And I think you probably have multiple guys that you're targeting right now, and you're seeing, well, which one of them, end up being the best value for us is probably what I'm looking at.
Yeah, and I hate to like strictly go off of like WAR ratings because that is just that's certainly other ways to value guys, but it just seems like there's a ton of guys within that like 1 to 2 range WAR, and then I mean heck, you even look like a guy like Spencer Steer had like a 1.5 WAR last year. So it's like, how much are we really going to improve the club? Depending on how much we spend for some of these guys, and does it really marginally improve your team from the next guys? It's a conversation they'll have to have internally. But the good news is there are, like you said, and we said, a lot of options.
All right. Who is your number two player?
Number two, yeah, I would have put this guy maybe as my number one, but similar to what we've been talking about, I think the higher cost and potential performance didn't necessarily get me there. But Alex Verdugo is a guy that I put as my number two here. Would solve the left-handed problem, would solve, the outfield problem, at least offensively. And I think this is, it's all about the narrative, right? In this type of stuff. So we've been talking about guys that just came off a career year. He had probably arguably one of his more down years, I guess you could put it, coming off of last year. So I think if we're trying to solve for essentially a power hitting bat in left field and is a left-handed hitter, I think you could do worse than him. Like I said, the downfall though is at least from what I could find, projected around maybe the $8 million range. So I don't know how accurate that is, but compared to if we're signing a guy for 3 or 4, you're doubling that for double the production. Maybe we'll see. But that's just a guy that came on my list, and I don't know. I just think similar to what we've talked about, some of the guys earlier today. The track record of the clubs that he's been in. Would hopefully bring kind of that. I want to talk about Nick Castellanos kind of swagger to the team, maybe, and ignite the lineup. I think he could be kind of a lightning rod in that regard. But I don't know. How do you feel about Verdugo?
Well, Verdugo's an elite defensive player, so I mean he has that going for them, and so at least you are getting a guy that is really good on one side of the ball. I don't like that. That's not going to regress for him next year. I kind of lean more towards a right-handed bat at this point. I think that the Reds were a little bit better against right-handed pitching last year. It was 89 WRC plus versus 84 against lefties. CES isn't a big splits guy. He actually has hit right-handed pitching better throughout his career. And you've already added Lux. You lost India, who was a pretty good hitter against left-handed pitching. So I kind of lean more towards, I think you probably need a right-handed bat. Now, that's not to say if a good left-handed bat kind of falls in your lap and improves the team that you shouldn't capitalize on it. Because I think that would be silly not to only focus on your desperate your need versus improving your strength if it's a really good deal. So not against Verdugo, he just wouldn't be at the top of my list.
That's fair. That's fair. So who do you got number two on your side?
I got someone that is going to make people really mad, which is what I strive for around here. I'm just kidding. I don't always do that. Harrison Bader. I tell you what, Harrison Bader is not a good hitter, not even close, but he is an elite defensive player.
That's a great sales pitch.
Elite defensive player. Throughout his career has hit lefties pretty well. So he does kind of fill that need. And I think he's now kind of gotten to a point where he probably understands he's a platoon player, where maybe going into like that $20 million deal with the Mets, he thought he could play every day. I think he's probably he got benched in the playoffs. So I think he pretty well knows that. Last year, he was really bad against everyone. He only had a 612 OPS against lefties, but throughout his career, 776. The year before in 2023 was at 936. So really mashed lefties. I think he would be a good platoon partner in the outfield, and he wouldn't really. He would kind of, if he platooned with Fraley, he would move Friedel probably to like left field, and you would just have an elite defensive player out there. You could bring him in and late in the game. He still has good speed. I think that he's a guy that helps you win more games than you might think, just because he's not a great hitter and he's not the sexy guy that's gonna improve your offense. But he is one of the best defensive players in baseball, and he's hit well at times. He's gotten hot. He's capable of being a guy that has um uh, a good year. He's not super old. He's just 30 years old. Will turn 31 soon, so he's still pretty young. I just think he's the kind of guy that if you get him on a 1-year deal, take a shot with him, I think he has a chance to be like a 3 or 4 win player if he hits close to average. So that's why he would be higher on my list, but I understand why everyone absolutely probably is disgusted at me for bringing that up. Are you disgusted, Austin?
I'm not necessarily disgusted. It's always hard for me to get excited about like bringing a former guy back that we've had before and kind of seeing it play out. But I mean, look, honestly, and the side note here, I was pulling up Harrison Bader and I did a search for his stats. Why is like the third result? Like I typed in Harrison Bader and it says Harrison Bader's wife. Like are a lot of people searching that? I don't know why that comes up whenever you type in the player's name. But anyway, so I pulled up his baseball reference page. And to your point, I mean, career 13 WAR last year, obviously only 0.9. But I mean, to your point, I think it's a guy that probably wouldn't demand a high price tag. He's got good defensive capability. I think he's probably better than some of the other guys that you could sign. Got some speed. I wouldn't necessarily look at it as a game changing pick, but it's almost like one of those guys that you like to have on your team that's just pretty versatile and pinch running situations, even if he didn't start in games. So I don't hate the pick. I just I don't know. I can see the message boards already if we signed him and like, this is the move you guys had, Nick Kroll. So I don't know. I just see that happening, and I don't know. I don't know if it can happen just because of that reason, essentially. But I don't know. I don't think it'd be bad.
Now remember, he was number 3 on my list because I had Hayes too. So
Right.
let's. I just
That's
think
true.
if you aren't getting Grichuk, you aren't getting Hayes, and then as we go through the rest of the outfielders, I don't feel great about them, but I feel great about Harrison Bader's defense. I know that is elite, and it's nice to have one known elite quantity. I think that Terry Francona could use that, and he's been very good at mixing and matching, and I mean, some of those Guardians teams had some really, really bad hitters that were great defensive players, and he's used them well and kind of figured out how to mix and match that. So Harrison Bader does feel like a Tito Francona player, though. I will say that. All right, let's move on. Let's kind of do more rapid fire here. I'll just let you kind of run through the rest of your guys on the list, maybe say 1 or 2 things about them. Just run through the rest of your list for free agents that at least are intriguing to you.
We talked about this, and I'm going to negate everything I just said about signing a former Red, but Tommy Pham, get a power hitting outfielder back on the Reds, little spark plug action if we end up doing a benches clearing
He's a
brawl.
spark plug.
Those things don't show up on the stat sheet, but I think it could bring a lot to the team. That's my rapid fire.
I will say about Pham, I know we were supposed to do rapid fire here, but I look at Tommy Pham and the profile is exactly what I want. Like he is the exact hits lefties well, solid defender, can run, all those things. I just don't think the Reds are going to bring it back, so I've kind of discounted that. But take all the extracurriculars aside, the baseball statistics from Tommy Pham is exactly what I want.
Yeah, and I'm giving him a plus for the extracurriculars. Like that's more of a reason to sign him. But yeah,
Okay, all right. All right, who else you got?
at least as far as free agents, I to your point, I was pretty short on the list once we kind of get out of this, but at least somebody that's interesting to me. I would even go with like a David Peralta. He's getting pretty old, but I just think it would be one of those kind of value picks that we could maybe pick up to just get some experience, major leaguers on the team rather than just calling up guys from AAA.
All right, the rest of my list here. Ramon Laureano's a guy that I think is a decent hitter. He's had pretty good success the last couple years against lefties. Um, a solid player. He's kind of had a lot of ups and downs throughout his career. He's been very inconsistent. So, what would you get out of Laureano in 2024? I don't know. Ramon Laureano last year, 31 games with the Guardians, put up a 43 OPS plus. Goes over to Atlanta and has a 128 OPS plus in 67 games. So that's kind of that's his career if you kind of look at it. So he is a guy that if it's not a lot, it's taking a shot might be worth a shot. Manuel Margot is a guy that I think could be a really sneaky buy low, and he's buying very low. He was very bad, almost full -1 win player last year. But this is a guy that has hit lefties very well throughout his career. He's had some years where he's really mashed against lefties. Again, if we're talking, he's probably not going to get a minor league deal, but whatever the lowest major league deal is probably what he's looking at. He's a guy that you might really be able to get some sneaky good value at. A veteran guy, I don't really love anything about Mark Canha, but I feel like you have to throw him on this list. He's very old among this list. He's going to be 36 here, and actually shout out to Mark. His birthday's coming up here next month. But he's a guy that doesn't really have any power whatsoever. But he's always been a decent hitter. I don't know. I don't love it, but he would help the Reds be better. I think he would. That's the rest of my outfielders other than Adam Duvall. I don't know. I don't know if I can be talking to Adam Duvall or not. I mean, he was really good in 2023. Absolutely bottomed out in Atlanta last year. He's going to be 30, his age 36 season. Still had good defensive numbers. I don't know. I don't know if he's even going to get a major league deal or not. But he's a guy that's interesting to me that I could see. I have two other guys that I just like that aren't outfielders, and that is JD Martinez. I feel like JD Martinez kind of sliding under the radar. Last year was a weird year for him. He didn't make the opening day roster because he was injured, didn't get going for a while. Ended up playing in 120 games. Had a 106 OPS plus, which is not what you're looking for out of a guy that's only a DH at this point in his career. But prior to last year, I mean, he was one of the most consistent hitters year after year. I think if you could sneak some value on him, he'll be in his age 37 season. I think there could be, if you get a 1-year deal for him for, I don't know, 5 or 6 million. I think last year was 1 year, 10 million with the Mets. So it feels like it would probably be somewhere around that range. I think I'd be willing to take a shot because he definitely is a guy that gives you some upside. I don't love the domino that it makes where you are forced to play either bench CES or Candelario or send CES to AAA because I'm a big CES believer. But when value's there, you sometimes got to just take it and figure out the rest. And then my last guy, a guy that I just love, is Ha-Seong Kim. I am a huge fan of him. Great defensive player, solid hitter, just a guy that's a winning player to me. I feel like you get him, you could throw Gavin Lux out in left. Let's go get Ha-Seong Kim and let's get Harrison Bader. We can throw Lux in left field. We have some really great defenders. We can really mix and match. But now I love Ha-Seong Kim. I'm shocked that he's not signed yet. I feel like he's a guy that only going to be 29 years old. Probably the years are going to be too much for the Reds is what I gather. But I have to mention him just because I'm such a huge fan of him.
Yeah, that would be an exciting pick. I didn't even think about him. To your point, I don't think a lot of teams necessarily have or did, but I wouldn't be against it. I think, and that's really, I mean, we could go through the free agents probably all night. The only other guys that I had targeted, at least on my radar, outside of the kind of the hitters, I had one guy at least from the relief pitcher aspect, Danny Coulomb from the Baltimore Orioles last year. Kind of unknown, at least from what I have seen, but 2.12 ERA last year. He's a lefty out of the bullpen. If the Reds wanted to shore up the bullpen at much, I think that would be a solid pick. And then there's a couple guys you could look at in trades. I think like a Mike Yastrzemski or Jesus Sanchez. I think we talked about earlier before the show here. But other than that, I mean, the crazy thing is there's just so many guys still kind of available that it's hard to single in on just one or two. I think at this point.
Bullpen's so hard to like try to say, yeah,
Yeah.
this guy's a good fit, just because there's so many of them and the value and the volatility of relievers. But I do think, man, when the Zips projection came out and you looked at the Reds bullpen projection, it was kind of like a big, oh, whoa, I didn't realize it was this bad. And I don't think it's that bad. I don't think you're not getting any credit for the potential that Luis May and Zach Maxwell could be absolute studs and completely change your bullpen. But I do think it would be wise of the Reds to go pick up a couple relievers. They don't have to be the top dollar, because I think that a lot of times when you're going out getting top dollar relievers, man, they're so hit or miss. Like guys like Craig Kimbrell. I mean, depending on the time you signed Craig Kimbrell, it was either the best contract you've ever signed or the worst contract. And literally, he's had that at different points of his career. It's relievers is so hard to predict. I don't really want the Reds to go out and make another Emilio Pagan $8 million sign, but I think a couple $1-2 million guys, if you have that left in the budget, would be wise of the Reds, and really hope that you hit on at least one of them and have one more dominant reliever. But that's definitely something that I'm watching for sure. Austin is the reliever market and who follows. I think they need to bring Buck Farmer back. I love Buck Farmer. I think you need that like reliable, steady force. I saw our friend Reds in 4 suggested the idea of Buck Farmer transitioning to being a starting pitcher, and I was like, that's kind of interesting. I don't hate that idea. That would kind of probably take him out of the running for the Reds. But I think he'd probably try to go somewhere like, I don't know, the White Sox or somewhere where he could get a chance to start. But I'm a big Buck Farmer fan. I'd love to see the Reds find a way to bring him back.
He was always the guy that like I wouldn't feel great when you came in the game, but like they show his stats on the screen and it's like a pretty good ERA. It's like, what is he having these good appearances? Am I missing them or something? But no, I mean honestly, and he would come in and shut it down, and I'd be like, all right, well, maybe I just don't know what the heck I'm talking about. But I wouldn't be
He,
opposed to it.
he's one of those guys you don't feel great, but you don't feel terrible about. And
Right.
you need as many of those guys in your bullpen that you don't feel great, but you don't feel terrible about. You don't need a bunch of like he was much different than like a guy like Fernando Cruz. Like Fernando Cruz clearly had the potential to come out and strike out the side, but
Or load the bases. Yeah.
or load the base and give a grand slam. Like Buck
Right.
Farmer didn't have a lot of those blow ups. Like he maybe get hit around a little bit, but he was reliable, and he's a guy that I would love to see the Reds find a way to bring back. And feels like it's gonna happen at some point, but I don't know. We'll see. You ready to move on to your couple trade ideas? I'm excited about this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of hit on him already when I was talking about Yastrzemski and Jesus Sanchez, but both of those guys, I was just kind of targeting the outfield market still and thinking of. I know we've talked about it in the past too, where it's like maybe the way that the Reds improve this team is through more likely on the trade scenario than free agency, depending on how much money they're getting from FanDuel now, I guess. But I don't know, just two guys that I don't necessarily think are going to be cheap, but as far as production wise, both kind of fit in the category of established big leaguers. They'd definitely be an improvement. We always have the conversation of what do you give up for these guys, and we don't necessarily know that piece, but and it all depends on if these guys are even like the Giants are willing to part with Yastrzemski and things like that. But those are two guys at least I targeted on the outfield trade market. But I don't know if you had any guys on your side or even outfielders or pitchers at position players, etc.
I like Yastrzemski a lot, and the fact the Reds have a little bit of money on a 1 year, I think $9 million. I think when he was predicted arbitration, he might have settled. I don't follow all the Giants news, but the Giants did say there was a report they were looking at potentially moving him with 1 year left. I think if you had the potential of you might have to do it in separate deals, but maybe you move Jake Fraley and you bring in Yastrzemski. I kind of like that. I think Yastrzemski's a better player overall I think that Yastrzemski has a higher upside. Like Yastrzemski, I mean, he's played in such a big ballpark. I'd be fascinated to see what he could do as a left-handed bat at Great American Ballpark. Um, I just think he's the kind of guy that has a little bit of upside. So yeah, I'm all about Yastrzemski. Guy that is interesting to me. If you have a little bit of money and a team's willing to eat it, how about Nolan Arenado? Would the Cardinals do that? I don't think so, but the Cardinals are kind of in a situation where like they're their lowest spot they've ever been with their fans. They might just be like, you know what, whatever. If the Reds are going to be the best taker, um, he's owed a lot of money. Over he's getting close. He's still got 3 years left of his deal. Still got 10 million of it paid by the Rockies. But 32, 27, and 15, the last one. The Cardinals would have to eat some of that. Like they're not going to trade him, and I don't think have anyone take that whole deal. I don't know. Arenado is a guy that I think is on the massive regression, but if you're getting him at half the price, I might be willing to take that regression. Certainly would be an upgrade at third base. Just an idea. I don't know, but I don't know. You could go down so many rabbit holes of guys, and again, like I said, Gavin Lux is a guy I had no idea that was available. There's another Gavin Lux out there. I just have no idea who it is.
Yeah, you bring in Arenado too, and I officially don't know what we're doing with our infield logjam at that point because he's going to be penciled in at third. To your point, maybe if he regresses, we don't start him all the time, but that'd be an interesting pick, especially in division.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake McCarthy of the Diamondbacks. There's been some rumblings that they might move him. We had talked about him before. Really good defensive player. I think he would make a lot of sense. I had kicked the tires on a guy like Alec Boehm before, but the price tag from the Phillies seemed like it was just way too high. That I couldn't really see that. But that's all I really have right now. But I do think trades is definitely a very plausible next step for the Reds. I could see that being how they end up going.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I feel like we were kind of waiting for maybe a lot of pieces to fall and maybe not necessarily on the market so far has happened, but we kind of have our TV deal figured out. Like we kind of have the pieces in place that you are essentially waiting for. So I don't know, man. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see kind of where things. I wonder if teams are mostly waiting for the big dogs like um, Santander to fall and things like that, and then there'll be a domino effect after that. But it'll be an interesting hot stove, I think, for the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, and I would encourage you go look up. There's a great article that actually, Austin, you sent to me, MLB free agents on the actual MLB.com that breaks it down. I would encourage you go to that and go look at the right fielders, center fielders, and left fielders. And you're gonna kind of feel like, oh, there's not as much of a panic. Like the Reds have to make a move right now. Now, keep looking at that. When you see more than half of the names gone that are gone right now, that's when I'll allow you to maybe start panicking a little bit. But if that list isn't moving, the Reds really shouldn't be in a rush unless one of these deals just fall, not perfectly, but one of these deals really come together for the Reds, or one of these guys just say, you know what, I don't want to wait any longer. My wife is sick of not knowing if we're going to Florida or Arizona, because that's a real thing for these guys. It really is. But if there's no one that kind of fits in that deal, like wait this out. Like it's not there's no race. There's no race. If you sign a guy tomorrow or you sign him the first week of spring trading, doesn't matter. Like it really does not matter at all. I'd rather have a better value deal or a better player even potentially that you wait and sign and after spring training starts than rush to just sign someone right now. I'm not worried at all that the Reds will rush. I think they're usually pretty steadfast on this. So again, that's kind of my overarching message is don't panic. There's a lot of options in the outfield. And there's a lot of time left and the trade market, that clock never stops. Well, until August, but I don't think we're worried about that at this point.
Yeah, we just got to get to opening day at this point. But yeah,
Yeah,
you'll open that list and you'll scroll down to left field, and if you find yourself recognizing half the names, it's because half of them have probably played for the Reds before. It seems like. So I mean,
there's
heck,
a
even
lot.
Nick Martini's on this list. Yeah, Jesse Waker. So it's Travis Janikowski. So I mean, like you eliminate the guys that got signed and maybe the guys that you don't want that have been former Reds, and then that's what you got left. But no, it's to your point, the supply definitely seemingly outweighs the demand, at least at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Austin, this has been a lot of fun. I wasn't sure if we were going to have 15 minutes of content like we always do whenever we start yapping. Here we are almost an hour later. So appreciate you as always. Good stuff today. Thanks everyone for watching or listening. If you're not subscribed to Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, make sure you do that. All kinds of content. We'll continue to bring as much content as we can this offseason. Leave us a comment. Who do you want the Reds to sign? Put that right in the comments. Let us know. I'll try to chime in and say if I like it or don't like it. And love to hear what you have to say as well. If you're listening in podcast form, thank you as always. Make sure you subscribe to Chatterbox Reds. Once spring training rolls, every single day, have a brand new audio podcast for you, recapping each of the spring training games. Those will be audio exclusives. So make sure to subscribe. Chatterbox Reds, wherever you get your podcast. If you could leave us a 5-star review there. Haven't got one in a long time. Maybe I've stretched everyone out that I can. But if you're the one that hasn't, you've held out on me, I could really use that. Those kind of stuff really does move the metrics and helps us be able to provide more content for you. So leave us a kind review. Would appreciate that. And all kinds of other great content on Chatterbox Sports. Links to that is in the episode notes below in your podcast feed. And if you're on Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, just click around. You'll find all kinds of good stuff. All right. For Austin, I'm Nick. Have a great rest of your day. And as always, go Reds.